You've been lied to about your engine oil. GM's latest recall proves it. Your engine might actually be safer with a thicker oil than what the manual says. In this video, we'll break down exactly why OEM oil grades are often designed for fuel economy, not durability, and show you how to choose the right oil based on real-world science, not blind rules. Keep watching, because at the end, I'll reveal insider strategies most mechanics won't tell you to protect your engine. The GM recall that changed everything. General Motors recently issued a recall that quietly exposed a major flaw in how modern oil recommendations are made. This recall affects 2021 through 2024 model year Chevrolet, GMC, and Cadillac trucks and SUV equipped with the L87 6.2-liter V8 engine. We're talking about high-end vehicles: Silverados, Sierras, Tahoes, Yukons, Escalades, their flagship trucks and SUV. The issue? Rod bearing failures. Not noise complaints, not oil consumption, not software glitches. Actual lower-end bearing damage. The kind of failure that destroys engines. Now here's where this recall becomes incredibly important. GM didn't just issue a warning. They issued a service procedure that tells dealers exactly how to identify engines that are already failing, and how to prevent failure in engines that haven't failed yet. The inspection starts with a computer check, not a teardown. GM instructs technicians to scan for a specific diagnostic trouble code, P0016. That code indicates a crankshaft to camshaft correlation error. Why does that matter? Because in this V8 engine, the camshaft and crankshaft are mechanically linked and monitored in real time by the engine computer. If a rod bearing or main bearing starts to fail, the crankshaft no longer rotates perfectly in sync with the camshaft. Even microscopic deviations show up as timing misalignment, and the computer can see it. If that misalignment is detected, GM's instruction is simple: replace the entire engine. But here's the critical part. If the engine passes the inspection, meaning the bearings haven't failed yet, GM doesn't replace anything mechanical. No new bearings. No redesigned crankshaft. No updated clearances. No revised oil pump. Instead, GM mandates one corrective action: drain the factory-specified 0W20 oil and replace it with 0W40. Same engine, same bearings, same tolerances, same operating conditions. The only change GM makes to prevent rod bearing failure is oil viscosity. From the factory, these engines were filled with 0W20, the oil GM originally claimed was necessary for proper lubrication and engine longevity. After the recall, GM officially reclassifies the engine to run on 0W40, installs a new oil fill cap labeled 0W40, and updates the owner's documentation to reflect the new requirement. This wasn't optional. This wasn't an experiment. This wasn't owner preference. This was GM acknowledging, through a recall, that the original OEM oil recommendation was not providing sufficient protection under real-world conditions. And that single decision changes everything. Because if thicker oil truly damaged engines the way we're constantly warned, GM would have just made the problem worse. Instead, GM used thicker oil as the solution. The myth: OEM don't want questioned. For decades, car owners have been fed one simple rule: always use the oil grade listed in your owner's manual, or your engine will fail. You've probably heard it dozens of times, at the dealership, on forums, even in car reviews. It's drilled into us like gospel. Low viscosity oils are safe, high viscosity oils are dangerous. End of story. But the GM recall we just covered completely shatters this myth. Think about it. GM's L87 6.2-liter V8 engines were filled with 0W20, supposedly the only safe choice. Rod bearings were failing. GM's solution? Switch to 0W40, a much thicker oil. If the myth were true, that thicker oils destroy engines, GM just would have made the problem worse, not fixed it. Instead, GM used a higher viscosity oil as the fix. That's right. The same engine, same bearings, same operating conditions. Only the oil changed. Here's the takeaway. OEM oil recommendations are not written in stone. they are often influenced by factors other than pure engine protection, such as fuel economy regulations, emissions standards, EPA test cycles. The low viscosity oil is safest mantra is less about saving your engine and more about hitting corporate and government targets. In other words, following OEM oil advice blindly isn't guaranteed to protect your engine. Sometimes it's actually designed to meet regulations, not to optimize reliability. And GM just proved it with their recall. This isn't speculation, it's documented evidence from a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer saying, "Your engine was failing on the oil we recommended. Thicker oil fixes it." That one line alone should make every car owner question the never go above OEM viscosity rule. Why oil viscosity actually matters. To understand why GM changed oil grades, we need to talk about something every engine depends on, but almost no one thinks about: bearing protection. Inside your engine, the crankshaft and connecting rods spin on tiny bearings. These bearings never touch metal to metal directly. They survive because of a thin film of oil that keeps the surfaces separated. Think of it like this: the crankshaft is a roller bearing spinning at thousands of RPM. The oil is a lubricating wedge that prevents metal surfaces from scraping each other. If that oil film is too thin, the bearings wear out, or worse, fail catastrophically. Now, what determines the thickness of that protective oil film? 3 things. 1. Viscosity, how thick the oil is. 2. Load, how much pressure the bearing is under. 3. Speed, how fast the crankshaft is spinning. GM couldn't change the speed of your engine or the load on the bearings. That leaves viscosity as the only adjustable factor. Here's the catch. 0W20 oil is designed to flow very easily, which is great for cold starts and fuel economy. But under high heat and high load, that thin oil can be too thin to maintain a safe film on the bearings. By switching to 0W40, GM is increasing the oil film thickness at operating temperature. That thicker oil reduces wear on the rod bearings, helps prevent misalignment between the crankshaft and camshaft, provides a larger safety margin when the engine is under stress. Put simply, thicker oil doesn't just slow things down, it physically protects your engine's bearings under conditions where failure is most likely. Here's a simple analogy. Driving with 0W20 under extreme load is like wearing a thin glove to handle a hot pan. Driving with 0W40 is like wearing a thick heat-resistant glove. It doesn't change how you cook, it just protects your hands. GM didn't redesign the engine. They didn't change the bearings. All they did was increase viscosity to give the engine a better chance of surviving real-world stress. And this is why viscosity matters more than the owner's manual often lets on. The real reason OEM push thin oil. Most car owners think OEM recommend thin oil purely for engine safety. That's not true. In fact, there are several key reasons behind these low viscosity specifications. And they're almost always about regulations, marketing, and fuel economy, not long-term durability. 1. Fuel economy regulations, CAFE/EPA standards. Low viscosity oils reduce friction in the engine. Less friction equals less energy wasted. Lower friction equals better miles per gallon. MPG. OEM are under pressure to meet corporate average fuel economy, CAFE, standards in the US, and thin oils are an easy way to gain tenths of a MPG on lab tests. 2. Emissions compliance. Thinner oils reduce internal drag, which lowers engine load. Less engine load means fewer emissions during testing. Manufacturers often tune engines to pass strict EPA emission cycles, sometimes at the expense of worst-case real-world durability. 3. Standardized testing cycles versus real driving. EPA and CAFE testing cycles focus heavily on city driving conditions. Low-viscosity oils give a noticeable improvement in fuel economy in stop-and-go city driving. On the highway or under heavy load, the difference shrinks, but the OEM recommendation doesn't change, because the manual is written for test cycles, not your specific driving scenario. 4. Marketing and sales incentives. OEM love promoting cars as more fuel efficient with every oil change. 0W16 or 0W20 recommended becomes a selling point for fuel economy, even though it may not be ideal for longevity. Owners often trust the manual blindly, reinforcing the perception that OEM oil equals ultimate engine protection. 5. Technology features that depend on thin oil. Modern engines include features like auto start-stop, shuts off engine at stops, cylinder deactivation, displacement on demand. These features work better with low viscosity oil, which flows quickly and ensures consistent lubrication during frequent stops and starts. Again, these features primarily boost EPA test MPG, not necessarily engine longevity. 6. Global variations in oil specs. The same engine often has different recommended viscosities in different countries. Why? Regulations, fuel quality, and emissions testing requirements differ. For example, the GM 6.2-liter V8 might call for 0W20 in the US, but 5W30 or even 0W40 in Europe or Asia, where fuel economy rules aren't as strict. This proves that OEM specifications are not always about optimal engine protection. They're about hitting specific regulatory targets in a given market. Key takeaway: OEM oil recommendations are not a universal safety law. They're often driven by fuel economy targets, optimized for EPA emissions, test cycles, influenced by marketing and regulatory pressures, and the GM recall proves it. Even a premium V8 engine designed for 0W20 can benefit from thicker oil when protection matters most. Same engine, different countries, different oil. Here's something that will make you question everything you thought about engine oils. The same engine, we're talking about GM's 6.2-liter V8, among many others, often has different oil recommendations depending on where it's sold. In the United States, that engine might officially call for 0W20 oil. In Europe or Asia, the exact same engine often runs 5W30 or even 0W40, depending on climate and regulations. Think about that for a second. Same internal components, same bearing clearances, same valve timing and tolerances. The only thing that changes is the country of sale, the local fuel economy and emissions regulations, and sometimes fuel quality. Why does this matter? It proves one very important fact. OEM oil recommendations are not purely based on engine protection. They are heavily influenced by regulatory targets. If a 0W20 were truly the only safe oil, why would GM allow 5W30 or 0W40 in other markets? That's the same metal, same chemistry, same mechanical tolerances. And yet, in many countries, thicker oil is considered perfectly safe, even standard. This is exactly why the GM recall is so revealing. GM's US engines were failing on 0W20. The fix was a thicker 0W40 oil, the same principle already applied abroad for years. So, blindly trusting the OEM manual in the US is not always the smartest choice. Sometimes the manual reflects regulatory priorities, not real-world engine protection. And here's a bonus for anyone who wants to dive even deeper. I recently did a full video explaining why the US uses 0W20 oil, while the same engines abroad often run 5W30. That video breaks down fuel economy regulations, EPA testing cycles, and even climate factors. If you want the full insight into why OEMs specify these oils, go watch that video. It will completely change how you think about factory oil specs. Important reality check. Before anyone runs out and starts pouring thicker oil into their engine because of this GM recall, let's set the record straight. Thicker oil is not automatically better. Here's why. Fuel economy impact. Higher viscosity oils create more internal drag. That means your engine has to work harder, burning slightly more fuel, especially in city driving. Over time, this adds up, reducing the fuel economy gains that OEMs were targeting with thin oils. Engine temperature. Thicker oil doesn't flow as easily. In some engines, this can lead to higher oil temperatures, which can stress seals or affect turbocharged components. It's not catastrophic in most cases, but it's something to be aware of. Not every engine benefits. GM switched from 0W20 to 0W40 for a very specific problem: rod bearing protection. That doesn't mean every engine on the planet needs thicker oil. Some engines, especially modern ones with tight clearances, are designed to operate with low viscosity oil. Going thicker without data can sometimes do more harm than good. Data is key. The right approach is science, not speculation. Use used oil analysis or baseline measurements if you want to try a higher viscosity. Check wear metals, operating temperature, and engine performance before and after the change. The GM recall proves one thing clearly: OEM recommendations are not infallible, and sometimes thicker oil is safer. But it also proves something else: don't blindly assume thicker is always better. The smart strategy is this: understand your engine, your conditions, and the reason behind the oil specification. Then make data-driven adjustments if necessary. This is the reality check. Knowledge protects engines far better than blind obedience to the manual. How to safely upgrade viscosity. So you might be thinking, if thicker oil helped GM's engines, maybe I should try it in my car too. And that's smart. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. Blindly dumping a heavier oil into your engine can cause more problems than it solves. The first step is to know where your engine stands right now. That means taking a used oil sample and analyzing it. A used oil analysis can tell you the levels of wear metals, contaminants, and the overall health of your engine. It gives you a baseline so you can measure the effects of any change you make. Next, if you decide a higher viscosity oil might benefit your engine, like moving from 0W20 to 0W30 or 0W40, you do it methodically. Drain the old oil, replace the filter, and fill with a new grade. But here's the key: this isn't just about thicker oil. You want to monitor how your engine reacts over the next few thousand miles. Watch temperatures, check oil pressure if your car allows it, and, if possible, take another used oil sample after a few thousand miles. This gives you real data, not guesswork. You can see whether the higher viscosity actually reduced wear metals, improved lubrication, or just caused higher operating temperatures. That's the difference between speculation and science. At the end of the day, the smartest oil decisions aren't about following the manual or copying a recall. They're about understanding your engine, testing changes safely, and making adjustments based on facts, not fear. That's how you protect your car for the long haul, and why the GM recall is such a perfect example of thinking critically rather than blindly trusting a number in the manual. How smart owners make oil decisions. If there's one thing to take away from the GM recall and all the myths we've busted, it's this: protecting your engine is about understanding, not blind obedience. Smart car owners don't just follow the oil grade in the owner's manual. They think about the engine, the conditions, and the data behind the choice. It starts with understanding how your engine is actually used. Are you towing heavy loads, commuting in stop-and-go traffic, or driving mostly on highways? Each scenario stresses the engine differently, and what's safe for one driver may not be ideal for another. The OEM recommendation is a baseline designed to meet regulatory and testing standards, but it doesn't always reflect the worst-case stresses your engine might face. Next, a smart owner considers the oil itself. Not all 0W20 or 0W40 are created equal. You need to know the viscosity, the additive package, and the high-temperature, high-shear properties that actually protect bearings under load. The difference in lubrication performance can be huge, even between oils that have the same rating on paper. Finally, the truly informed driver uses data to make decisions. That might mean getting a used oil analysis before and after changing viscosity, monitoring engine temperatures, or keeping an eye on wear metals in the oil. By testing and observing, you can see whether a higher viscosity oil actually improves protection or just adds drag and heat. In other words, smart oil decisions are about science, not speculation. The GM recall didn't happen because owners used the wrong oil. It happened because the factory spec wasn't optimal for the stresses the engine experienced. By understanding the why behind oil grades and using real data to guide your choices, you can protect your engine better than blind adherence to any manual ever could. Here's the bottom line: OEM oil recommendations are a starting point, not a rule carved in stone. They're often written to meet fuel economy targets, emission standards, or testing cycles, not to provide the absolute best protection for your engine under every condition. The GM recall proves this beyond a doubt. Engines that were supposedly safe on 0W20 were actually at risk, and the simple fix was a thicker 0W40 oil. This doesn't mean you should blindly start putting thicker oil in every engine. If you understand your engine, monitor its performance, and make decisions based on real-world conditions and testing, you can protect it far more effectively than by following a manual without question. The GM recall is a wake-up call. It's proof that even manufacturers sometimes get it wrong, and that the smartest thing you can do as an owner is think critically, understand your engine, and make informed, data-driven choices. At the end of the day, protecting your engine isn't about following the OEM blindly. It's about understanding what your engine really needs, when it really needs it, and why. Now you know why blindly following OEM oil recommendations can sometimes put your engine at risk, and why understanding viscosity is so important. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more car insights. Don't forget to check out my in-depth analysis on the differences in oil viscosities for the full breakdown. It's packed with essential info for every car owner,